Is Trump 2020 getting scared of Bernie? Plus, Iowa caucuses are just 3 weeks away. Let's look at some early state polling. There's nothing to see at the Clinton Foundation. The DOJ's inquiry winds down. And officials say there's more to the Ukrainian plane crash than meets the eye. I'm Jamal Simmons. Here's why you should care. With the Iowa caucuses just 3 weeks away, we wanted to take a look at where the candidates stand at some of these early state polls. Let's start with the first two states to vote, Iowa and New Hampshire. The new CBS News YouGov poll shows Sanders, Biden, and Buttigieg in a three-way tie for first place in Iowa. They got 23% each. Senator Elizabeth Warren has 16%, and Senator Amy Klobuchar has 7% in the Hawkeye state. And in New Hampshire, we have Sanders and Biden in a tie for first at 27 and 25% each, with Warren trailing at 18. I'm here with Julia Manchester, our political reporter at The Hill, and a friend of Hill TV. You all know her well. Julia, what do these polls tell you about what's happening out there on the road?
You know, what it's really telling us is that Biden continues to maintain his slight lead, but Sanders is really starting to edge up. And we've kind of seen this narrative play out throughout the campaign. Biden has been the front runner and Sanders has been consistent either in second or third place, but his second place position is really starting to solidify. And maybe in some polling, you're actually seeing him starting to edge Biden. So that's something we're really watching closely. Some of the lower tier, you're seeing Amy Klobuchar's efforts in Iowa starting to pay off. She's making a bit more of an impression. I wouldn't call it a full-out surge, but she could have an impact in the state. Andrew Yang obviously having an impact in Iowa. He's invested quite a bit in Iowa as well. Warren and Buttigieg, though, are starting to slip in a number of these polls, and they both kind of had these sugar highs throughout the campaign, but that seems to be over now.
You know what's interesting about Klobuchar is he seems like she might be making herself a really strong contender for vice president in a way that maybe someone didn't think of her as being a year ago.
Absolutely. And when you talk to voters out in places like Iowa and New Hampshire, one of the things they say about her is she is so likable and she's so moderate, easy to talk to. They don't feel like they're being lectured or talked at. They feel like they can have a conversation with her. They also look at her as someone who could potentially have an edge on Trump in the fact that she's not completely progressive. She does have this moderate edge to her. You know, she's a senator from Minnesota, which has some very conservative parts to it. So obviously she's had to contend with that part of her state. So she's very marketable, I think, to a lot of these voters.
I think that's right. Here's also some new data from South Carolina and Nevada that has some interesting results. According to a new Fox News poll, Biden comes out ahead in both states. In Nevada, he's followed by Sanders, Tom Steyer, and Elizabeth Warren, who are actually tied in one of these polls out there. In South Carolina, however, Steyer is in a statistical tie for second with Sanders. Julia, Tom Steyer is picking up some speed in these states. Does he have a chance at winning this thing or at least having an impact and getting into the lead?
You know, today, if you were to ask me if Tom Steyer is going to be the nominee, I would say absolutely not. Obviously, in this world of politics, we can't make predictions. Anything can happen.
I just covered your face there. It doesn't matter.
However, Tom Steyer has a lot of money, and he's invested heavily in these states. He's been putting out ads. I remember over Thanksgiving break in particular, it was watching a Steyer ad, then a Michael Bloomberg ad. And with both of these two men in polls, you're starting to see that name recognition resonate. Voters see them, they recognize them, and so they're putting them 2 and 2. I think also Tom Steyer's need to impeach efforts before he started running for president has also resonated with a lot of Democratic primary voters. They know who he is, they're familiar with him, and I think this is reflective in those polls.
One of the things about advertising campaigns that we often miss is that sometimes those campaigns, they live at like a very low level in people's minds. You don't really even know you've seen it, right? It's like one of these things you hear on the radio or you watch on cable news. And then one day somebody asks you a question, and you think like, oh yeah, 1877, like whatever, like you start like reciting the thing. This is what's happening, I think, with Tom Steyer, like you just said about his advertising. People have been seeing Tom Steyer on TV. They probably didn't know who he was or pay much attention to him. And now he's out there in the campaign trail. And they're thinking, oh, that's the guy from for the impeachment ads. We like that guy.
Absolutely. And I would say it's the same thing with Bloomberg as well. People remember Bloomberg from being the mayor of New York City. They know that his name is on a major media company, a financial media company. So these are people they're familiar with. And that's, I think, what you're seeing resonating. I don't think either of them have the biggest shot at the nomination. However, I think they both have the potential to impact who gets the nomination. With Bloomberg in particular, I think he stands to maybe maybe shave off some votes from Biden in Iowa in the Super Tuesday states. And then with Steyer, he could shave off some votes from potentially progressive candidates like Bernie and Warren, but we don't know exactly who he'd impact the most.
And just think about it. Steyer has spent $60-something million in ads himself, and Bloomberg has spent over $140 million in ads. Put them together, that's $200 million. There's a graph out there somewhere that shows how much they've spent versus everyone else. It's just amazing how much. I mean, when Kamala Harris left the race, she said that Mike Bloomberg had spent more money in ads at that point than she had even raised as a candidate. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
All right, and lastly, it seems the Trump 2020 campaign has been paying attention to Bernie's recent surge. The Trump campaign has reportedly been sending emails specifically targeting the Vermont senator. One email reads, "Fact, Bernie Sanders is a wealthy, fossil fuel guzzling millionaire." That's not me speaking, people. That is the other campaign. Julia, is Team Trump getting ahead of this fight and jumping on Bernie Sanders too soon?
He's certainly on their radar, and they are paying attention to these polls and really seeing him start to climb in these polls, and they are trying to paint him as an out-of-touch progressive. What was so ironic about that statement was Donald Trump is also a millionaire, and he has used private jets in the past.
When has Donald Trump ever let his own personal history get in the way of a good attack on somebody else?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the Trump campaign is very much paying attention to that, and they're keeping their options open. I think they're obviously looking at Biden and Bernie Sanders, obviously two different attack strategies there. I would say Biden's a bit more complicated because he's tied to the impeachment issue and such, but Donald Trump is very much getting ready and keeping these two guys in mind.
Absolutely. Julia Manchester, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jamal.
See you next time.
Thanks.
Despite the political rhetoric, the Trump Justice Department is about to give Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation the opposite of a lock her up chant. Instead, they will set her free. After 2 years, it appears the DOJ can find no significant wrongdoing by the Clintons, and America will be spared the kind of trial we admonish other foreign governments from pursuing. Instead of prosecuting former rivals who lose elections, Trump's DOJ will let Clinton get on with her life. Why you should care. When Barack Obama became president, many people were disappointed he didn't pursue criminal investigations against Bush administration officials for misdeeds during the war on terror. The Obama approach was that the election gave the country an opportunity to move on, and focusing on Bush administration misdeeds would only prolong the cycle of recrimination that kept the country from turning the page to a new chapter. President Trump operates under no such desire to turn the page or move forward. He seems to love pointing the finger backward. Whatever the president does, the Clintons, the Obamas, and now the Bidens are obviously worse. But on this day, it appears the Department of Justice will not get caught up in Trump's web of obfuscation. When it comes to the Clinton Foundation, there is nothing to see here, folks. Time to move on. You should care because the Clinton case isn't the only one DOJ is pursuing to fulfill President Trump's political agenda. You should care because if the Department of Justice becomes a political retribution shop, none of us are safe. You should care because everyone can be investigated if only to bankrupt us in lawyers' fees. Anyone can be prosecuted if only to provide political cover, knowing the charges just won't stick. To paraphrase Speaker Nancy Pelosi on another topic, it's not about how bad our political opponents are, but how good the Department of Justice is. And that kind of restraint lies liberty from tyranny. As families and friends mourn the loss of loved ones in the downing of Ukrainian Airlines flight in Iran on Wednesday, world leaders are calling for answers. The crash killed 176 people, including dozens of Iranians and Canadian Iranians. U.S. officials are now confident the Boeing plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile. In a press conference from this morning while announcing retaliatory sanctions against Iran, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said it was likely that this is indeed the case.
We do believe that it's likely that that plane was shot down by an Iranian missile. We're going to let the investigation play out before we make a final determination. It's important that we get to the bottom of it.
There has been lots of speculation around this crash, and we won't get into it all here, but suffice to say there's a lot more to learn. Here's why you should care. The crash came just hours after the Iranian government fired missiles at U.S. forces in Iraq and days after the U.S. killed a top Iranian military general. Iranian officials have denied accusations that they intentionally downed the flight. According to the Iranian government, the plane crashed due to technical malfunctions, and the head of the Iranian investigating committee has invited American Boeing representatives to be present during the investigation. Pompeo also said this morning that investigations into the plane crash will continue. As President Trump attempts to allay rising tensions in the region and as investigations into the crash begin, all eyes are on Iran. Thanks for watching Hill TV on YouTube. Be sure to click subscribe and hit the bell so you know when we post new videos. And head to thehill.com for all the latest political news.